The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you. It's Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. It's been a week. It's been a day. And we'll dive into Nebraska's new athletic director, Troy Dannen. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. Plenty of thoughts on the direction Nebraska's going, the hire, the timeline, the pick, as we are going to dive in and get ready for any news tomorrow, any news Friday. Hopefully the news Friday about 10 p.m. is history made. We'll have thoughts on Nebraska as we get geared up for the NCAA tournament. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We'll get to your thoughts as we'll yell out our starting five. That is always part of the show, the first five in the stream. We invite you to catch the show on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Give us a follow also on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio, and catch us on the different social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter at KFOR. Of course, AM 590, Omaha's ESPN, their Twitter handle. Give that a follow. Our friends out in central Nebraska, Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island on ESPN Superstation. News Talk 900 in Columbus. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com and dial us up. You want to go throwback? Go for it. 489-1240 or 800-825-5865.
Also, if you want to get connected with the show, but you don't want to call in, you don't want to tweet us, you just want to listen, but you want to be connected, great opportunity for you this week. The Hail Varsity Radio Bracket Challenge.
Yes, Bracket Challenge.
You can find the link to that on Chris's Twitter as well as on my Twitter, the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. You could also send us an email. If you're not with Twitter or YouTube or any of that, you can send us an email, and we'll get you the link sent that way as well if you'd like to join the Hail Varsity Radio Bracket Challenge. Some great guests, some great fans of the show, all participating, and we'll see. I'm only going with a one bracket strategy this year, so what you see is what you get in that challenge, and you'll see what I think is going to be happening this season, right or wrong. I'm probably going to finish in the 10th percentile like I always do. The bad 10th percentile, not the good 10th percentile. So we'll see how that goes, but we encourage you to join the Hail Varsity Radio Bracket Challenge as well.
Be at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill tomorrow, 4 to 6. Be there beforehand. Get your seat for their Creighton viewing. And what is awesome is pizza, is beer, is bang bang sauce, is boom boom shrimp. I mean, it's all glorious when you get to the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, 204th Avenue, just off the highway in Gretna. We are on the road tomorrow for it, and excited to see you 4 to 6. Okay, Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity. He'll check in here in about 15 minutes. We'll also hear in hour 2, spend some time and run down a guy who's part of this triangle. If we want to talk Nebraska, if we want to talk Washington, if we want to talk Iowa ties, a man with all three, Jim Walden. Evan Bland also going to join us in hour 2. So I missed the first part of KG's thought. Topic idea for the show
for a
on a slow news day. Second worst rash you ever had. Where did you have it? And for how long did you scratch? I got the chicken pox.
I don't think
KG.
you were serious.
I got the chicken pox when I was 34 years old, and then I got the shingles.
Oh, did you?
I got the shingles back in 2016.
I always see the commercials about that, and I don't know.
It's for old people.
Yeah, I didn't know people that were still in the workforce had shingles.
below the age of 50 got the shingles. Yeah, I still blame my wife on that one. But anywho, let's get into the AD.
Thanks for the topic, KG.
Yeah, KG, appreciate that's good. While we're here, while we're shouting out our listeners and viewers on the stream, Matthew W., you are first across the finish line. Brandon in. Brent checks it as well. KG, you heard he's 4. Patrick says, hey, I'm here. He's number 5. He says, I had to let someone else win today. Dion checks in. Dion, what's up? Good to spend time. Anonymous is in, and Anonymous is right on. Dennis LeBlanc had the greatest 5-day run as athletic director in history. Love it. Trapped in SEC country, says slow news day. Brian checks in as well. Crew is in. Crew, what are you drinking? Brian also says hello, and we'll get to more of your comments. Lance. And Lance is where I want to start, because the Pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports, the Professor Bill Dolman, been chatting with him back and forth, and the Pride of Fairbury, Bill Dolman, nailed it in his tweet. When you want to play connect the dots and say how and why and who is the new AD, Troy Dannen? Well, this is absolutely it, what Bill Dolman tweeted. And how does a guy like Troy Dannen end up on Nebraska's radar? How does a guy like Troy Dannen get hired little more than a week, to Trev's departure? How does Nebraska move that fast? Elijah, it's freaked out some people possibly. But here's what I believe. I believe that the right people knew that this was a possibility. I think the right people knew that, there's a situation here where Trev may move on, and who knows if you have some contingencies going on once you had your president, Teddy Carter, leave, And then, Trev decides to leave not long after re-upping. So what is your DEFCON 2 plan? And you talk, and if you're Matt Rhule, I think this. I think Matt Rhule probably had an idea of where he wanted to go and where Nebraska wanted to go. And if the powers that be are smart, they ask Matt Rhule, and they probably asked him last weekend, who do you like? Well, if you're Matt Rhule, you're in the know on a lot of things. Just my speculation. And Matt Rhule is going to reach out to the people he knows and trusts the most. That is Ted Carter, who's at Ohio State, and Pat Kraft at Penn State. Well, Troy Dannen, if you read Bill Dolman's tweet, was AD in the AAC during the Rhule era at Temple, along with friend and AD at Temple, Pat Kraft. Kraft and Dannen chaired the athletic director's executive committee in 19 and 20. Kraft was vice chair, so he was working hand in hand with Dannen. 5 years together, Kraft and Dannen in the AAC. So if I can't get my guy, Pat Kraft, can I get somebody he thinks extremely highly of? I bring in Ted Carter because he was at Navy while in the ACC. And if you get Ted Carter saying, you got to look at Dannen, and if you get your guy, Pat Kraft, saying, you got to look at Dannen, if you can't have either one of us, this is your guy. Now, had a pit stop at Washington, but was on that stage, and although be it in October, you oversaw October to championship game appearance. You did your damnedest to keep Kalen DeBoer. What you did do, I think, is go get one hell of a coach in Jed Fish from Arizona. You had to turn and burn that real quick. On top of that, what you did in Tulane, incredible. You competed for and won 21 championships across all sports. You got Tulane. You hired Willie Fritz, good coach. You hired Fritzy, and he got you to a Sugar Bowl and a win over USC. Not only that, but brother, you're from northern Iowa. You go down to New Orleans. What do? You shake hands, you kiss babies. You find enough money in New Orleans for little old Tulane, not in the SEC for the last 50 years, to go fundraise and build a stadium and make Tulane a spot to go to that's not LSU. So you're good at what you do. You're great in your lane. And I think that's what Nebraska got, is a guy that can fundraise and see into the future. He's been on all these big committees. It's everything Matt Rhule touched on and highlighted, Elijah, Monday with what you need from a visionary standpoint. Is he going to be that? Time will tell, but it fits the criteria and the resume matched.
And there's been some comments in about the timing of this. We can get to that here in just a second, because I think that is important to talk. Was this rushed? Do they have candidates ready in the back pocket? We're going to get there in just a second, because I have some points to make. But I think one of the big things with Tulane that stands out to me, at least, is the fact that he ran that athletic department with a view of the future of college sports.
Yes.
He understood that in the future of college sports, if you don't have a football program that is making money, that is doing well for itself, you will fail to exist in college sports in the near future. That's what he understood really, really well. Did he fundraise well for the entire athletic department? It could be argued yes, it could be argued no. He understood, though.
He fundraised for the most important, which is the football part that pays all the bills everywhere.
There it is. There's been some complaints. I was surfing through the Tulane message boards. They're small, but they're out there, just to let you know, the Tulane message boards. I found them. I'm surfing through them. It's funny how the reaction to him leaving for Washington is different now with the reaction of him coming to Nebraska. The Tulane fans are like, screw this guy, whatever. He's just jumping around now. But whenever he left for Washington, people complained, well, he didn't really take care of the smaller sports. He also turned Tulane into a athletic department that is going to stick around for a while because of what he did with the football program, investing in the football program, understanding if you have a good football program, you're going to have donors that are going to be willing to step up and fund your sailing program. They're going to fund your men's basketball program because you have a good football program. And you know what? That is kind of the future of college sports. And Nebraska is a little different than Tulane in that regard, because I don't think it's going to struggle to find donors in the football field, but he understood the future of college sports, and that if your football program isn't worth a damn, you as an athletic department are not worth a damn. He understood that. He took care of Tulane in that way. And he said his reason to go to Washington was, well, he wanted to win. He wanted to win at a high-level football program. Went and won for 6 months. I think he probably saw the writing on the wall that, you know what, Washington's probably going to struggle with a new head coach moving into the Big Ten, losing all your talent from a college football playoff team. And he saw the next up-and-comer in the Big Ten in a place that's close to home and a place that's going to take care of him financially, and said, you know what, you need help with your football program? I can help you out there. I don't think his job is going to be all that centered around sports not named football to start out. I mean, a lot of other sports are in a really good spot. Volleyball, men's basketball, women's basketball, aside from the lawsuit, baseball, softball, all these sports, wrestling, let's add that. I don't want to sweep them under the rug. It's a big time of year for them. Like, all these sports are doing fine for themselves. He's not going to have to worry about them. His job coming in is, hey, do what you did at Tulane. Take care of the football program. Invest in the football program. Get our football program back to a point of relevancy so we don't have to worry about it, because if your football program's in order in the modern college football with TV media rights, your athletic department's fine.
Here's the deal. Give every asset, aid, and inch of yourself to football with what they ask for. Be a helper with football, because Coach Rhule's job is to take care of it on the field.
Yes.
And once that happens, your job as AD is to make sure that money machine's rolling. And listen, I think Matt Rhule gets the assist here on the hire. I think, and we'll hear from Matt Rhule here. We're running out of time here, but we'll hear from Matt Rhule at Pro Day before the top of the hour, around 4:40. His comments on Athletic Director Troy Dannen. I think Matt Rhule probably sold him on coming to Nebraska. This is a guy that matched what Nebraska needs on paper. It matched with what some of Matt Rhule's mentors said about him. And it's a guy that you can work with, not for, I guess is the best way to put it. From a president's standpoint, the irony here is you have Jeff Golden hired as president, or not hired, but he's the priority hire. So he's got 30
Soon
days
to be hired.
Yeah, he's got the 30-day vetting process, and he's got history at UNO and chancellor of UNMC. That fits your AAU criteria. Your job right now for Nebraska, right now to live life in the athletic and academic and this Big Ten world, whether it stays at 16, whether it jumps to 20, whether it goes to 24, is to remain in the Big Ten, remain as somebody that collects a check. And to do that, two things need to be real. within the next 7 to 10 years. You need to be in the AAU. And to do that, your research dollars and funding, and wow, look at us in the world of research and development, i.e. the Med Center. You just hire the chancellor. He can make that happen.
You can bridge the gap between the two organizations.
Get under the umbrella. Get under the umbrella, and make sure it counts as one campus, like Mitch Sherman was telling us yesterday. And then go get good at football. Get competitive at football. Be a playoff contender in football. Do both those things happen as we start the next 10 to 15 years of whatever college football / AFC, NFC becomes? It's going to be okay. You need and I was listening to a little bit of Trev's presser, and you need another category on your spending in the athletic department, and that's about $20 million a year for your student athletes. That's a very real expense. So work to do, but I think this is okay. It's an okay day for Nebraska.
My big problem is just with the president's job, as we're running up against a break here, is you had 7 months to get this done. Why'd it take 7 months to get it done?
Well, it's the guy that Trev wanted.
Exactly. Well, that's my sticking point is could you have avoided the drama of last week by not scuffling your feet on this? Well, time will tell. That's my only problem.
It turns into it's more than presidents, right? It looks a lot like that South Stadium project.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Mike and his bi-weekly newsletter. Get a subscription to that. Mike B. at hurrdatsports.com. Just want to highlight Lance. And Lance been on Twitter with some really good input. Lance also says gold helps combined. This is the president to be, assuming things go through. The NU research dollars for AAU. Dannen's a highly respected football guy who has respect across the country. Two massive things to keep your seat at the table. And Lance says a great day for NU. Mike, what a week it's been. How have you processed all this, bud? Thanks for the time.
Well, I'm glad that my face is here because my head's been spinning and you didn't see the back of my head at this point. But yeah, it's crazy, and I kind of follow along what Elijah said. You know, it's surprising to me that we've waited this long for a president to be identified, and then all of a sudden, it's like athletic director leaves, athletic director hired, and we've got we got to go through the vetting process, but the university president. That seems to me to be unusual timing. Mm-hmm. How fast that happened after it didn't happen for such a long time.
Urgency, Mike. Urgency is the word of the week.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess Trev Albert's departure was, created some urgency that didn't seem to be there beforehand. And the other thing is that what you mentioned, Smitty, is the South Stadium project. I don't know I don't know how that figures into things, but I'm sure that it does because of the fundraising and because of all the other commitments that boosters are having to address.
But Mike, if timing and the so-called lack of urgency are your two complaints with these hires, I think that's a net good thing that you're not complaining about.
Finally, some urgency.
At least you got the urgency. You got it across the line. I am kind of I hope this wasn't rushed, but based on everything I've been reading, everything I'm seeing about these guys, I don't think this was rushed. Gold was a candidate for a while for the president's job, and you look at Dannen, just seems to fit the bill of what Nebraska needs right now. Similar to how Trev Alberts fit the bill of what Nebraska needed 3 years ago, a guy to come in and trim the fat of the athletic department, get the ship sailing in the correct direction. I think he did that. I think you have a guy in Dannen that now can take the next step. He doesn't really have to worry about, at least as it stands right now, much else besides football. Football can be his big priority, and based on his career, that's what he has done in his stops. Is he's made football the top priority and gotten football in order everywhere he's gone.
Yeah, and I agree with your comments earlier about the importance of football. You've got to get the football program in the kind of condition where it's relevant again, because it has a trickle-down effect with all the other sports. Even though Nebraska is creating success in other sports, where football has not yet got to that relevancy stage. And that's the thing that the new athletic director, I think, probably has to be his responsibility. And because of his involvement in things like the NCAA football competition committee, 4 years on that, I think that's a positive. I think his involvement outside of just the school that he's been at, his involvement in NCAA things is important to Nebraska to get that football program back where it needs to be. And you've got the football coach that I believe can do it, but we'll see.
Mike Babcock's with us from Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports. Mike, it's so important to have somebody that can see into the future, so to speak. And if you're on a bunch of these committees, you're educating yourself, you're expanding your knowledge, you're making connections, and it's not end all be all, but you're in the know with which way the wind's blowing, or at least you'd think so, right? You know what weather to expect, and I think that's as much as anything. But I think this, to me, is a guy that Matt Rhule wanted, had great respect for, and maybe didn't know personally, but knew of, as he said earlier today, professionally. But I think the mentors in Matt Rhule's life probably really went to bat for a guy like Troy Dannen. And I think that endorsement, or those endorsements, is what made today so swift.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And again, I think that the bottom line is, obviously, you've got to be able to generate revenue. That's the thing. That's the primary. That's the priority. Is you've got to be able to generate revenue, because you've got projects going on, you've got NIL, you've got money that you're paying the coaches. I thought it was good. Fred Hoiberg got an extension on his contract. I think Fred was the one that said he'd known Troy since he was in high school, or what, he'd known him for a long time. Probably that Iowa connection, but you've got to be able to generate revenue, and it starts with football.
Mike, let's spend a minute here on Jeff Golden and a thought on just the marriage that needs to be a reality with academics and athletics, so it's not a roadblock moving forward, because it's been a roadblock in the past. Can you coexist?
Well, I like the term marriage, because it's like one of those old times political marriage where the couple doesn't actually like each other that much, but they know they have to be together
time
for
to
the family.
We do family pictures every 5 years, Elijah, and got to be there for appearances.
I'm saying like the King of England marrying his daughter off to the King of France's son for important political purpose. That's what the marriage is between academics and athletics. The couple might not like it, but it's what must be done for politics.
Yeah. Is it gold or golden?
Gold.
I said golden. Well, it's a golden hire if you're a medical fan.
Well, I was going to say, it's Nebraska got gold there. That's what you're looking for.
They got
right?
gold. It was a golden hire. Yeah, gold. Gold is it.
Yeah.
But long time history, and they have him and Trev worked together at UNO, right? I mean, I've heard different things. That this was the guy Trev wanted, that there was maybe some friction between the two. I don't know. But long and short of it is this a guy that was on deck post Ted Carter? And it's been that holding pattern between the Board of Regents. You had the deadlocked vote, but they moved forward.
Yeah. And, maybe he and Trev didn't get along or whatever. Maybe Trev's departure was the tipping point that caused something to
get
happen
movement.
To get something to actually move forward.
Here's what I believe. Not to go rewind too much, Babbers, but I think from a timing standpoint, Trev wanted to get his own project done, i.e. South Stadium, and then I think there were bigger aspirations. College football's our conference commissioner. The other part of this is, being an AD in the SEC and Big Ten puts you in great position for whatever's next on the food chain in the world of college football. I think get one more thing accomplished here, i.e. football back on track, a stadium project like the Suites or like the Hawks or like the North End Zone complex or like the new football building that Bill Moose started. Trev needed kind of that signature moment from an AD building standpoint, then you move on.
Yeah, well, I think that, that a lot of people are trashing Trev. I think that he accomplished some things. He got Nebraska moving in a direction. Now we've got a new athletic director that's going to take it from there and move it forward. That's the way you have to look at it, I think. It wasn't like Trev left the athletic department in a shambles. I think that there's an opportunity here for Dannen to move forward, to take it to another level.
Mike, once Dannen moves into the office, gets everything squared away, it's his first day on the job, what is priority number one for the athletic department? What is Dannen's priority number one whenever he shows up on campus?
I think to make sure that he connects with everybody. You mentioned earlier academic athletics. Make sure that he connects with everybody in the administration, university administration, in the athletic department. I think it's just going to be a kind of a welcoming thing for him to make those connections. And then I think that he probably has to look at, I may be overstating, but this South Stadium project has got me confused. I understand the basis of it, but the funding for it and the process of doing it and the ticket holders that are going to be displaced, I think that has to be addressed fairly quickly, because you've got the boosters to be concerned about, right? I mean, you've got to make the connection there as well, and I think that's a lot of behind the scenes kind of stuff that has to be done in order for this program to move forward to the level that you want to have it.
Well, and it'll be easier to fundraise for it if you're knocking on a playoff door or you're 9-3.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. You have a chance at doing that next year. Mike Babcock's with us. Mike, a couple minutes here. Let's talk Friday. Let's talk Fred and the Big Red and Amy Williams. But big moment for Nebraska basketball, the men, as they are set to dance with, a team that looks like they can handle on paper. But the backdrop is the backdrop with Trev and A&M. But this moving forward is really a, dare I say, gettable game for Nebraska basketball. I just uttered that in March.
Yeah, well, let's hope it's the same way with getting Nebraska football back to where it belongs and getting in a bowl game and that sort of thing. Is the Nebraska basketball, men's basketball, let's get a win in the NCAA. The only Power 5 school that doesn't have a win in the NCAA tournament history. Does have an opportunity, no question about that. But I watched some of the Virginia game last night.
Sorry about that.
As much as I could take. And, you never know what's going to happen in the tournament. But, I'm optimistic for both the men and the women. The men win. It's probably one and maybe not 2 wins, but
2 and through, Mike.
Yeah. But focus on A&M. I think it's pretty, Nebraska men and women, Creighton men and women, they're all in the NCAA tournament. I think that speaks well for the state.
Mike Babcock with Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, we'll check in next week. Thank you much for the time, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Fred Hoiberg answering some questions on new athletic director Troy Dannen. We'll get Jim Walden's perspective as a longtime coach in Washington, at Iowa State, Washington State, Iowa State, and longtime assistant at Nebraska. He got the triangle covered of all three states in play, with Nebraska naming their new AD, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. We'll get to more of your comments here in the stream. Can participate. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio, where you can go and be a part of the show. We will have some funny picks as we got to be equal time here, Elijah. We've got Biden's presidential bracket, and you also have, I assume, the Donald will be doing a bracket at some point, you would think. But
he'll just release it on Truth Social, though.
Right. I don't follow Truth Social. But a little bit more. Evan Bland was at Pro Day, was there with Coach Rhule today. Get his take on the situation as well. 489-1240. And let's hear from Matt Rhule on the hiring of Troy Dannen today. This was at Pro Day a little bit earlier. Here's the head ball coach for the Big Red.
Troy was AD at Tulane when I was at Temple, so I don't have a strong personal relationship, but I have a really good professional relationship with him. I think Troy fits all the criteria, that I think we're all looking for. He's an accomplished athletic director. He's been on all the big committees. He's been on the oversight committee. He knows the issues facing college football. He's an unbelievable guy, and it's no slight to the University of Washington, which is a wonderful place, my sister's alma mater, but I just know that he wanted to come home, and he wanted to be here. So, I know the announcement went out. I'm fired up, excited to have him. I think, the University of Nebraska took a step forward today.
So some emails to get into, chris@hailvarsity.com. So our friend Greg in Michigan asks, any concern the new AD was only at Washington 5 months before jumping ship? Well, you're always going to be concerned with that. The contract, Elijah, helps quell any immediate worry because it's $12 million buyout early. It decreases eventually. But you get $1 million signing bonus. You're making $1.6 a year. You paid to get him. And I think Matt Rhule had enough common people that knew Dannen that they could talk with the, all right, this is a good dude because he's one of Kraft's people. This is a good dude because he's one of Ted Carter's people. And I think Matt Rhule can say, hey, come here. It's all good. I'll do my part, you do your part, and let's not get in each other's way, and let's coexist and win some ball games across multiple sports. So Greg asks, any concern about that 5-month window before jumping ship? And I look at it this way. He made a really good football hire in Fish from Arizona to Washington. Didn't stick around for it. Washington's looking for a basketball coach. Washington's also jumping to the Big Ten. And I don't know that I fault him for leaving. I don't think he's running, but it's not a great situation. But he didn't cause that situation. It's the domino of Saban. It's the domino of Bama. And I think Nebraska's going to be okay and better off for it. I know we're all big Garth Lissman guys. And, Garth's time will come, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. And he may be happy kicking it in the SEC and being the heir apparent there to Sankey, too. So, but I think this works. I think he needed somebody that Matt Rhule was comfortable with. And if I'm going to listen to anybody on my coaching staff and get their input, I'm going to listen to the football coach we're all freaking out about leaving potentially just last weekend or when the Trev news broke.
Well, if you aren't concerned about a football coach or an athletic director or an administrator leaving,
or your quarterback or a star defensive end, that's the world we live in now.
If you're not worried about it, you are living with your head in the sand. That is just the reality of college sports and college football right now. That being said, we heard it from Dan in an interview on a podcast that what he cares about at this point in his career is winning.
Yeah.
And I think...
Be judged by that.
I think, despite what Nebraska has been for the past decade, you compare Washington following DeBoer, maybe the best head coach that they'll have in my lifetime. You never know with that. That's, I guess, hopefully I live a long time.
No, you're not wrong.
I mean, you look at that, him leaving, the fallout of, the entire roster being gone. It was rebuild time for Washington. With the new head coach moving into the Big Ten, it was rebuild time. You get an opportunity to come closer to home with a football program that is on the come up. I think Dannen respects Rhule immensely from his time in the AAC, working kind of alongside Rhule when Rhule was at Temple. I think he sees the opportunity at Nebraska. And if you care about winning, if Matt Rhule can get things rolling the way that we think Matt Rhule can get things rolling at Nebraska, and the way that you as a Husker fan should understand with the resources and fan support that Nebraska has, I think there's a lot of reasons that Dannen would not leave. That being said, it's college sports right now. You can never have a surefire, this guy's not going to leave, this guy wants to be here till he retires. That's not how college sports works right now. It's just simply not.
You feel better about getting a Midwest guy.
But you feel better about getting a Midwest guy. You feel good about what he has said in the past about how much he cares about football and how much he cares about winning, that Nebraska can be that in the next couple of years. I'm not worried about a guy in Dannen leaving after 5 months. It's a simple
pretty unique situation at Washington.
In 3 years, circumstances can change and a guy can be out the door. You can't predict what's going to happen in college sports 3 years from now with everything that's changing on a seemingly day-to-day basis. But am I worried about him leaving in the near future? No, not particularly. If he does, that's college sports for you.
Let's hear more from Rhule here on Rhule reaching out to Dannen and getting a feeler.
Yeah, Troy. Like I said, I think as people go through this, they kind of sit there and say, "Hey, what are the things that are here?" And I think I said it loudly for everybody the other day in the press conference how excited I am about the potential here. I can tell you this: these scouts are blown away by the facilities that we have here. Absolutely blown away. And so I was excited, when I talked to Troy and I talked to any other candidate that reached out to me, excited to tell them what I believe can happen here.
Last thought, let's squeeze it in, Rhule, on the speed of the hire, because this ramped up real quick.
Yeah, I think it speaks great. Now, the fact that this happened so quickly, I think it speaks great about the amount of candidates and interest. But I also think it speaks about the job that Chris Kaborek did to get this done this quickly, to not get embroiled in, hey, well, we have to go. We want to follow process. Don't get me wrong, and we want to make sure that we do everything right. But we also want to match a need when a need arises. And I think my experience with Chris Kaborek throughout this has been fantastic. Governor Pillen's been fantastic, so I'm very grateful.
Rhule took to the stand and stage and podium for the state, needing to heal, did it Monday, and maybe did it Monday feeling pretty good about this guy being in. Because you hope that there was some sort of conversation over the weekend and you move forward. And the other thing about Dannen, as Lance lays out, Lance is on fire today in the chat. He had 8 years at Tulane, and people saw what he was doing at Tulane, and you stuck there because you were doing well and you were happy, it would seem.
How about this? The read I get, and I think it's true, is Nebraska is in a better spot than a team that was playing in the national championship game 3 months ago.
Yes, they are. We'll wind down hour one next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Evan Bland coming up, and the gentleman Jim Walden, longtime coach at Washington State, Iowa State, and knows Nebraska extremely well with his time with Bob Devaney. So his take on the native Iowan, Troy Dannen. So Justin emails in. So longtime listener, Hail Varsity on the pod. And Justin this morning felt defeated. Our Board of Regents, the week recapped in order. You extend Hoiberg, no AD, no president. Hire an AD. After 1 week of searching, you have found and hired the ideal candidate. Also, still no president. That changed, or at least the process changed this morning with Dr. Gold. And you nominate a president after 9 months of searching, only to find the, quote, perfect candidate 50 miles up the road, and he's actually been your employee for 10 years. Doesn't this seem bleep backwards? The heat got turned up on him. They made a rush in the hires. Our leadership at top has no vision or execution. Hope they have their boxes packed come November. Disclaimer, I have no opinion on the hires themselves, only that our regents should go to A&M. Well, listen, you can do the math there, and be frustrated and skeptical.
And I get it, because that's the one thing I keep coming back to today is, why was Dr. Gold not
good enough 9 months ago, 7 months ago?
Why was he not good enough a month ago?
Because you need a majority vote, and if you've got a staring contest / game of chicken with agendas and preferences, you're going to be at 4-4. Somebody showed up and forced some action. Again, I go back to who should have the biggest say in who the next AD is right now. The guy you can't lose. Rhule talked about retention, talked about investment. Well, he's the biggest thing to retain here, period. And seemingly you have a guy that he's good with. We have time for one more Rhule comment.
Probably.
Cut 5, is that relevant here? I don't have it pulled up. Forgive me.
We already hit cut 5. The speed of the hire.
Let's get into
working with Dannen.
Yeah, working with Dannen. Thank you, Elijah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's have it so it's actually coming through the speakers.
I'm sure we'll sit down and kind of talk about all the things that are next steps. I'm one of those guys. To quote Peter Kiewit, I've learned to be pleased, but never satisfied. So, the building's not done yet. I want the building to be done. So I want us to just keep pushing forward. But I think the way that I'll be successful as the football coach here is really just focus on my area and just trust Troy's going to handle his area and crush it. Because I saw what he did at Tulane. I mean, it's amazing what he did at Tulane, and that's why Washington wanted him. That's why other people wanted him. And as he said to me, this is just a special place. And he knows. I mean, anybody that grew up, in the time that we grew up knows what Nebraska can be.
Well, you have the poem from Paul Harvey that Matt Rhule tweeted out not long after the Trev news. Nebraska went and got another a proud farm boy. Mm-hmm. And give me that work ethic. And people stay in their lane, do their job, and coexist. It can work in Nebraska again.
I keep coming back to this. I'll end the hour. All's well that ends well. I don't think it's proven that this situation has ended well just yet. First steps towards ending well have been taken. If Dannen ends up being a competent AD, if Gold ends up being a competent president, we'll forget about the drama of the past week.
Just get Nebraska back into the AAU. Let your football coach go win some football games and
exactly
get some fundraising going. Hour 2, Evan Bland on the way. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. It's hour 2. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. More comments from you in the stream. Thoughts on Nebraska's new AD, Troy Dannen, from a longtime college football man in the state of Washington, in the state of Iowa, and a former assistant at Nebraska, Jim Walden, coming up. We say hi to Evan Bland, Omaha World-Herald, at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. Evan, you've been all over it, brother. Good coverage as always. A wild week. How are you doing? And let's talk about the new AD. What's your take?
I'm doing all right. I was thinking that the pro day from 2020 would never be topped that was the day the pandemic hit and everything shut down. I thought, man, what a memorable pro day that was for all the wrong reasons. This one has been that way for every other reason. I mean, I'm heading down to the Hawks Center, and an AD is being named, and a priority candidate for the Nebraska presidency is being put out there, and Dylan Rhule is throwing at pro day, and Matt Rhule stops by to talk for a minute. It was just a pretty wild day on an event that generally isn't so much that way, but kudos to Nebraska for wrapping this thing quickly. And I think that was something Matt Rhule mentioned today. He said, man, a week ago at this time, people were reeling and trying to come to terms with the idea that their athletic director was leaving. And now here we are a week later, and Nebraska not only hires somebody, but they hire a sitting Big Ten AD, albeit somebody who's only been at Washington for a handful of months, somebody who is on multiple oversight committees, who has his hand on the pulse of the biggest issues in college athletics, on the biggest issues in college football, and who has had a reputation at his other stops at Northern Iowa and Tulane for being, a program builder or a program sustainer. So by all accounts, a really impressive turnaround for Chris Kaborik, the interim president for Nebraska, and just the university in general, to get that leadership in. And it looks like somebody who has the experience and also, I think, has the vision similar to what Trev Alberts did to help Nebraska navigate these uncertain times in college sports.
Evan, we'll dive further into both Dannen and Gold here in just a second. But if you would have told me 4 months ago that the first time Dylan Rhule would throw publicly as a member of the Nebraska Cornhuskers football team,
in front of 50 scouts,
in front of a whole bunch of scouts with media in attendance, and it would end up being the third, maybe even fourth biggest story in Nebraska of the day, I would have called you absolutely insane given all the hype. But that's what this past week has been, is it made Dylan Rhule his first time publicly throwing the pigskin around as just a side note in today's news.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's come to. I mean, obviously, we all know the importance of an athletic director. The president spot being filled is significant, with it being Dr. Gold. You talk about just the importance of Nebraska, the university being back in the AAU status, and that's something that Trev talked about. That's something that Commissioner Tony Petitti has made known, like that's important, that academic status in the Big Ten. And you look around at what that 18-team league is going to look like next year. Nebraska, at the moment, is the only school that's not part of that membership within the conference. And so that's a big first step in what you would presume to be a move to bring UNMC under the umbrella of the university system, which would go a long way in putting Nebraska back toward that end. So, I mean, that's obviously huge as well. And then you talk about, in some ways you got to feel bad for Nebraska basketball, right? I mean, men and women getting back to the tournament the way that they are, and it almost feels like we haven't had the proper week of anticipation to sort of talk them up and reflect on what has been and anticipate sort of what's at stake and what's on the line with everything else going on. And you just think about this time of year, typically people are filling out their brackets, but there's not maybe a lot of local angles to it. And now you've got all these teams out there. You've got Omaha, by the way, hosting first 2 rounds here coming up starting tomorrow as well. So, absolutely wild time, and Dylan Rhule just is another little, I suppose, for the only time ever, sort of a side conversation to everything else going on.
Evan, let's talk a little bit about Dannen and the dots that are out there to connect with Rhule and Hoiberg, as both have been talked to here the last several hours, and you were front and center with Coach Rhule. I don't want to say both Matt Rhule and Fred Hoiberg signed off, but I kind of feel like they signed off, or they strongly said, hey, here's a name, here's a guy who's out there, here's a guy in a situation that, through no fault of his own, Washington got raided. So let's take a look at a guy from the Midwest. I mean, it's funny if you just kind of look at the paths that cross and the impressions that are made. And then some of the guys like Troy Dannen make an impact on some pretty impressive and influential people, a la Carter, a la Kraft down the road.
Yeah, it's whenever you have a hiring of this magnitude, it's always fascinating to go back and see, okay, where did it start? What are the connections? What are some sort of just areas in which maybe Troy Dannen has intersected with Nebraska athletics in the past? Like, what does it mean that Troy Dannen was the athletic director at Northern Iowa when Scott Frost was an assistant there? It doesn't really mean much, but it's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. What does it mean that Greg McDermott was the men's basketball coach at UNI when when Troy Dannen was there. I don't know. It's just kind of fascinating how some of that works. And with Rhule, he was at Temple in the AAC when Dan was with Tulane, and so they were able to overlap in that time as well. So it just kind of, you never know, I think, is maybe the takeaway. You never know the relationships that you build, the encounters that you have with people, how that may show up later in life. And Rhule said today he knew Dannen on a professional level, kind of had a sense for some of the things that he had done at Tulane, was looking forward to getting to know him more on a personal level. But, he said he kind of checks all the boxes that Nebraska is looking for in terms of someone who can run an athletic department, but also has sort of a strong sense globally of what's going on as well. And I thought one of the things that Rhule said that was, maybe most important for people that follow football is he said, look, now that Nebraska has an AD, Rhule can do what he does best, which is be a football coach. Let the AD do what he does best, which is handle issues sort of above that pay grade, and now get back to business as usual. This wasn't a search that people expected a week ago, and now it's a search that I don't think people thought would be over as soon as it is. And I think there's a sense, when we're talking about urgency within the athletic department to move forward, I think there's a sense of excitement, a sense of definitely optimism about how quickly things can move forward with Nebraska. So, I think Dannen's first day is later this week, a couple days from now. Spring practice starts here Sunday or Monday, and things are going to be rolling. So as crazy as it's been, it does seem like we're going to get back to some sort of routine with all of the important principal characters in place here real soon.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World-Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, as we talk about Dannen kind of filling the shoes of Trev Alberts whenever he arrives, Brent brings up a great point in the stream chat. He says it's going to be a big challenge because in the 2023 football season, Trev single-handedly scored just as many points against top 25 opponents as Iowa's entire offense. And I think whenever you think about that, the impact of Trev can't be understated there. Obviously, that's a joke. But what is priority number one for Dannen whenever he steps foot on campus and into this summer? If there's one overarching theme that might define Dannen's first month or two on the job, what do you think that's going to be?
I think the first thing he has to do is set the expectation, set the vision. What's the goal for Nebraska athletics moving forward? Is it sort of on the same track that it has been in terms of what the expectations are for winning? Does the stadium expansion project move forward, or is that going to be put on pause for a little while to sort of reassess and reevaluate what that can look like? I think it's going to be about getting to know your head coaches, right? Like Dannen comes in, it's unique in the modern era of Nebraska athletics, where you have a new athletic director coming in at a time of relative stability, right? There's no obvious hire that Dannen needs to make. There are a lot of the programs right now are being run by coaches who are in solid positions, coaches who know what they're doing, who are winning games. And so he's not coming in trying to put out any fires or make any hires. I think it's about what are his standards, what is his vision for Nebraska in the short term. But then I think more importantly, as this new era of the 18-team Big Ten comes into play, what's Nebraska's place in that? Is it to be in contention for the CFP every year? Is it first to get back to a bowl game? Like what's sort of the annual standard or the annual expectation from the AD? I think that's something that if you're a head coach in any of Nebraska's sporting programs right now, you want to know what your boss thinks. You want to know what's important to your boss so you can keep your job and continue to do it well. So I think that's probably what it is a lot of getting to know the current coaches and the current staff, and then over a longer term, sort of articulate and map out what Nebraska's place is in this new world of college athletics.
Stability for all, as Matt chimes in. Matthew says politically the stadium project might require a new governor. Do you think they shelve it for just a bit, get a 9-win season and a wild bowl appearance under their belt, push for the playoff? You think? I mean, that makes shaking hands, kissing babies, and passing the offering plate a lot easier, doesn't it?
In a lot of ways, yeah, it does make sense. I mean, you're bringing in a guy in Dannen who's from the Midwest, but it's going to take him some time to get up to speed with the movers and shakers within the program, the people that he's going to need to get to know and ask for donations and things of that nature. And I think just from where the program is right now, I mean, Nebraska still is looking to end that bowl drought. And yeah, it looks like things are trending in a positive direction under Matt Rhule. But, think how much more momentum there could be toward a project like this in November, in December, next off season, if they do break through and they win 6, 7, 8, 9 games, whatever it might be. I think there's a lot more enthusiasm for it. I think people may not want to hear it, but I think back to something that Trev said a couple years ago about facilities, to the extent of, facilities should in a lot of ways reflect the success of the program and not sort of set the standard for what that excellence is. And I think Nebraska football, as it's sort of rebuilding and regrowing from within, needs to prove itself worthy of something like this before that project maybe continues forward and moves forward with enthusiasm from the fan base. So, yeah, I think it would make sense to see how this season goes, reassess, recalibrate with some new leadership, maybe further define what that plan could look like. And it's possible that if the season goes how a lot of people in Memorial Stadium hope, that this project maybe could have some wind behind its sails in a new way, maybe next offseason.
Evan Bland with us from the World-Herald at Evan Bland, OWH. Evan, a quick thought, bud, on Husker basketball Friday, and how's the Evan Bland household, the basketball fan base, feeling? You feeling good about Memphis?
Both of my elementary age kids are all for Nebraska, so they're all in. And I think it kind of feels that way for me too. I think psychologically this team's in a good place where they're aware of the history that's at stake, winning that first NCAA tournament game from as a power conference school. But I don't think it's hung over their head. I don't think it's something they've sort of shrunk away from. So I like that. And I think from a matchup standpoint, the first 15 minutes are really fascinating to me because I don't know that A&M has the raw basketball skill to make up a big deficit. But at the same time, if they get ahead and Nebraska's trying to shoot its way back, and A&M's sort of dominating the boards as they have, I'm not sure that's a recipe for success either. So I think you got to start hot. I think Casey needs to have his one shining moment. Maybe that's on Thursday. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I feel good about kind of where this team is. Maybe it's not the best matchup in the world, but I think they've shown in situations like this that they've been able to rise to the call, and it feels like maybe that's going to happen again on Friday.
Evan, last thought, 30 seconds. Last time Nebraska was in the tourney, I was a sophomore in high school. How different was your life last time Nebraska was in the tourney?
I had no kids, lived in Iowa, so yeah, I'd say quite a bit different.
I was in downtown Lincoln with a bunch of listeners, and everyone was getting hammered. It was wonderful.
As much as things change, sometimes some things stay the same.
That part won't change. Yeah, win or lose.
We still booze, yes. Evan, we'll check in next week. Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you. There he is, Evan Bland. Gretna, Rhodey, tomorrow. Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill up at 204th Avenue, just off the highway. The Gentleman, Jim Walden, up next on the new AD.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Let's talk to Hall of Fame coach, knows Nebraska, knows Iowa, knows the state of Washington. The Gentleman, Jim Walden. Coach Walden with us here. Some thoughts on Nebraska's big day and big week. Coach, how we doing? Thanks for a few minutes.
Well, I'm doing just great, Chris. It's good to hear your voice, and I hope everything's going with the Hail Varsity folks there in Lincoln, and it's been a Evidently, I think it's been a great deal, a big, nice hire for him, and getting over the shock of 12 hours.
Yeah, shock's the word. There's other words that have been used in the past week. But
I can imagine, yeah.
Nebraska able to get Troy Dannen. He was at Washington for about 5 months. Before that at Northern Iowa. And between stops, did a great job at Tulane. Coach, I wanted to reach out to you and just what's the reputation of Dannen that you may know about or have seen being in Washington State and having connections there, and also the number of folks that you know in Iowa, because he did good things in Northern Iowa, and then Tulane, of course, got them to a Sugar Bowl.
Well, a couple things for me. I'm trying to go back to my memory when I was there at Iowa State, and it seems like, did he play basketball for Northern Iowa? That's just when he was in college. I'm not sure he did, but it seems to me like my first knowledge was Troy was, but it may have clouded up and become more of when I stayed later at Iowa State, because I stayed there, Chris, from 1994 till I was no longer the coach until 2005. Well, all that time he was the athletic director, so I know the name, and I just know he's so well thought of in the state of Iowa. And if you go back to his years, and I mean it sincerely, I'm not just tooting his horn, I don't know that they've had a better AD to deal with the problems that Northern Iowa has. And that's the same problem that a lot of those teams like Northern Iowa, like probably the few exceptions would be the Dakotas. But when you get down to eastern Washington, to Idaho's of the world, and then Northern Iowa's, it is a constant financial struggle. And I distinctly remember what a good job I thought he did with pay scales, with budgets, with athletic teams when he was there.
You look at some of his accolades, and Matt Rhule had just a wonderful press conference to kind of calm the fan base on Monday, and what he laid out as far as resume/job description fits to a T when you look at all the committees Dannen's been on. And you know how this works, Coach Walden. You either know the guy or you got people you trust and know that know the guy. And I know Pat Kraft worked on several committees with Dannen, and they all crossed over. And Ted Carter also knew the AD reputation. I mean, that kind of inner circle family is what I'm talking about. So this feels like a Matt Rhule suggestion as much as anything to me.
Well, I think the most pleased it makes me feel is that Coach Rhule is happy, because I think that tells me that his president is working with him and listening to him, and I think it's vitally important. Trust me when I tell you, without any shadow of a doubt, if you want a successful head football coach, and maybe even throw in a basketball coach, or even a successful athletic department, but I think let's back up to football. It is imperative that football coach trust his athletic director and his president. And trust me when I tell you, I crossed ways with a couple that created havoc with my life. And there is just no end. So when you have a great relationship with the athletic director, who is working hard every day to help you be better because it's good for him.
Coach Jim Walden with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Coach, what I think made it hurt was he had a football guy that was leading the athletic department. He got Nebraska football, really made a priority to take care of Coach Matt Rhule.
He's smart.
And he's very, very smart with how he did it. And that's kind of the question with Dannen moving forward is, in your eyes, with an athletic director, what is the balance between taking care of the football team and the football coaches and taking care of everything else with the university? Obviously, football is king in college sports, but what is that balance between being a guy who's taking care of the football team and being a guy who's taking care of the whole athletic department?
Well, let's go back to, you're too young, I can tell that probably, or you're just about too young. You go back to Bob Devaney. Bob Devaney was the essence of athletic director. He was the football coach at Nebraska for 11 years, and then he became the athletic director. So immediately his love and his percentage of taking care of Tom Osborne was priority. That didn't mean he didn't like Joe Cipriano. It just means that he was going to take care of football. If you will both go back and remember that 30 years ago or more, about 50 to 60% of all athletic directors had been coaches in either basketball, football, or something. So there was an attitude that they understood who was paying the checks. Unfortunately, we eased out of that, and we got into hiring PE teachers and doctors hadn't played anything, never played horseshoes. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think we need to go back to athletic directors having some basis for having done something athletically in their lives so they get a picture. You ask my feelings about the AD and Dannen. If he spends 60% on football and 40% on the rest, he will be a tremendously successful athletic director because football, whether we like it or not, pays 90% of the bills or 70% of the bills, whatever.
So, Coach, we're getting to that point, and you got to coexist academically and athletically. The Nebraska needs to get back in the AAU to probably appease their Big Ten brethren when it comes to research dollars and academic achievement. The other side of it is, you're printing money in the Big Ten right now, and you got to get things up to speed on the football field. I think Matt Rhule is going to do that and do it well, but you've lived that world where the balancing act is real between chancellor, president, AD, football coach, and it seems to be more scrutinized and intense now, and it's always been somewhat of a problem at Nebraska some sort of way.
Well, and you're right. You're probably leaving off one more person that's coming to play now, and that's called the NIL head, whoever you've got your heading that up. So now you got a president, an AD, a head football coach, and an NIL dude in the middle of all this mess. And I don't think I need to get into the portals. That's 90% coaches. But the NIL, that's a whole different thing. And I think it is very important, I mean vitally important, that those four people work hand in hand together. But the football coach must have the knowledge of what it takes to be successful because it's going to be up to him to spend the money more or less. And so that puts another burden. I go back to Nick Saban saying, one of the reasons I expedited my reason to get out of this business, even though he was at the age when he could, I'm getting tired of re-recruiting my own football players. That's back to NIL. So the game is changing. The system is changing. I just believe it takes more of you guys together. I just think it takes more administration, the AD, the president. It's more than ever before. Have athletic departments got to work in unity with their AD.
Coach Jim Walden's with us here. And, Coach, last thought, while we're talking a little bit of NIL, do you have a reaction to Caden Proctor over at Iowa? It seems like he transferred back to Iowa, watched Caitlin Clark play some basketball, collected some NIL checks, then before he even steps on the practice field, he's back off to Alabama. A reaction?
Well, somebody raised the ante. And so what he's done is put himself out there as a financial prostitute. That's what it's coming off as, and when the truth comes out, that's what it's going to be. I mean, that's not hard to figure out. It's just going to – that's why I say these things are not good for college athletics. It's not good for the athletes. There's going to come a time when you can't remember why you stayed at one school for 1 year, I mean, isn't it a strange thing when you all see that Joe Doe started at South Alabama, ended up at Memphis, and then now he's in Omaha, or he's in Creighton. I mean, boy, you got to think he's having a great college life, isn't it? He's been in college 4 years. He's been to 3 different ones. He doesn't know he can't remember the last 5 guys' name on any team he played on. So it is just a silly thing we're going through. But while we're on basketball, I want to throw out a good congratulations to my good friend, not my good friend, but I knew him well. Freddie Hoiberg has done a great job for you, and I just couldn't be more happy for him.
Did you ever get to play any horse or pig or any of that with Fred back in the day at Ames?
No, I didn't, but I went to a lot of practices. We did a lot of things together when Johnny Orr was living, and of course he was Freddie's coach. And we're always doing Cyclone outings, and Freddie would come to these things and speak. And so he would travel with us a couple of times, and we've had a lot of interesting conversations about Coach Orr. and believe me, there's some interesting conversation to be had about Johnny Orr.
I want to hear one of those conversations because one of my first interviews ever professionally was Johnny Orr.
Yeah. Well, Freddie used to say one of his favorite things was, you knew things were not real good when you'd be in the shower with your teammates and the head coach would come in naked and take a shower with you. And he said it really wasn't a pretty sight on top of that. But you don't get to – it's not very often you can say you showered with your head coach when you were in college. But that was just Orr. He thought their shower was better than one he had, so he went in there with the players. And I guess all the players would just shake their head like, oh, my goodness. But he didn't give a hoot. Johnny Orr was one of the great men in my life and in this world.
Not many college players can say that they did that. Not many players can say they wanted that to happen.
No, I mean, it's not, are we going to get the meal money taken away? Are we going to have to run at 5 a.m. as, oh, my God, is Coach showering with us after the loss?
Next time you see Freddie, I said if Coach Walden wants him to tell you guys about how what a great looking body Coach Orr had in the shower with him.
We'll ask Fred that after a win. All right.
Well, hopefully that'll be the next game he plays because that'll be a big win for him. I think that's who they're playing, but it'll be a good. I hope he wins it. Should be fun. I want to say one more thing to all the fans at Nebraska. Other than that, I love them. Always have. I thought it was one of my great experiences of life. But instead of feeling bad about Trev Alberts leaving, leave on this thought. And September 1st, Jennifer Cohen left as the AD of Washington and went to USC. And in December of the same year, their head football coach left Washington and went to Alabama. Troy Dannen came, stayed 6 weeks or 6 months, and left and went to Nebraska. In the meantime, they decided to fire their basketball coach, Mike Hopkins. So if you think you're having a bad day at Nebraska, just look at the Washington Best. It'll make your day go better.
Coach, we appreciate you. Thanks for a few minutes.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center, and we say hi to Dr. Brandon Seifert. He's got his bracket filled out. It's a winner, I'm sure. Dr. Brandon, not good news for Kansas as they've struggled, to put it nicely, down the stretch, and their standout player, Kevin McCullar Jr., not going to play in the tournament. Not the word from Bill Self yesterday, missing 6 of the final 12. That includes the Big 12 tournament. Dr. Brandon, let's talk about a bone bruise in the knee and managing that. Is this something that surprises you that it's been this lingering?
Yeah, Chris, a tough situation for him. These are challenging to manage. I would say kind of the vast majority of these you can kind of play with. It's sore, it's achy, but you can kind of just get through it until you can basically have that kind of longer period of rest where this will just eventually kind of calm down on its own. But as we talk about this, kind of a confusing term, it's a bit of an ambiguous term. So you hear kind of this deep bone bruise. There's kind of a variety of things you can use to describe this. Essentially how we as orthopedic docs describe this would be what we call a chondral meaning cartilage, chondral contusion. And so what happens here is that cartilage layer, that's that smooth layer on the ends of your bones, allows those bones to kind of glide against one another. Below that is the bone, so the cartilage sits on top of the bone. And essentially what happens with one of these quote-unquote deep bone bruises, cartilage bruise, chondral contusion, you have basically some kind of direct impact to the area where that cartilage kind of gets pushed down, and then that force goes through the cartilage and down onto the bone. And then what happens is you get all this kind of fluid, inflammation, swelling that happens at the bone, kind of at that bone-cartilage interface where they come together. Quite painful. There's a lot of nerve fibers in that area, and it almost, in some ways, you can kind of think of it as kind of a stress fracture of the bone, if you will. And so as we look at these, it's a big term. It's kind of a spectrum. And so you can have a small bone bruise. There's just a little bit of bruising, and most of our high-level athletes just fight through that. There's probably a lot of them that don't even know they really have it because they don't get an MRI. They just push through it. Then as you start to get bigger in size in terms of these bruises, then there's more inflammation in the bone. And then you can reach a point where the bone actually probably gets a little soft just underneath that cartilage. Those hurt obviously a lot more higher energy goes through that to cause that. And then you can get to a point where you actually may have a little chip or a crack in the cartilage above that, and then that fluid can kind of leak down on the bone. But it's hard to say, as we relate this back to this player, it's hard to say exactly what level he's at. I would assume, though, he's at a level where he's probably starting to do a little bit of softening of the bone underneath, perhaps maybe some little wear and tear in the cartilage. And that's probably why this process has taken him a lot longer than typical to get better.
And you talk about this process taking a lot longer than usual. Apparently it's been 6 weeks since the last time he practiced, and he's still not going to be a go for the tournament. That's obviously big because Kansas didn't really look like themselves over the final 6 weeks of this season. Now they turn their attention to Samford in the NCAA tournament, and I think Samford's a pretty popular pick there. With all that in mind, Dr. Brandon, 6 weeks not being long enough, is this something that could affect him into the offseason, being a guy that was a breakout star this season? I'm sure he's got some professional basketball aspirations on the way. How long do you think this injury could be affecting him?
Yeah, absolutely. The big question for us, Elijah, will just be, how much cartilage involvement is there. If it's literally just a bruise in the bone, cartilage over the top looks really good, then he's got, great prospects going forward. Shouldn't be, kind of a huge issue for him. The issue becomes, if you start to break down that cartilage, then that can become a bigger issue where it becomes more of a long-term problem. Just here in the short term, yes, obviously you start to worry about, can he get into the combine? How does he look in the combine, especially if he has those kind of NBA aspirations? That potentially could be quite limiting for him, at least initially. But if they kind of look past that and say, hey, this guy's his cartilage looks good, he's going to be better at some point, then that may not be, a huge factor for him. In the, just overall, kind of in general with these, how long do these things last? I always use kind of our college athletes, high school young kiddos as our example for, these people heal a lot faster than the rest of us old guys. And so typically with these, if I have somebody get kind of a deep bone bruise like this, depending on the size, they can hurt for a while. Some of our high school and college kids will struggle with these things sometimes for 4 to 6 months. And so he might be on that pathway. And by struggle, and of course there's a variety of those where it's just, hey, doc, this thing is just always achy and sore, but I can just get through it, versus this guy where, hey, I'm just really struggling to play. We just got to shut you down. And that spectrum is there. And it's just kind of different for everybody in terms of those previous factors that we listed.
KU's really struggling, Dr. Brandon, as you look at their injury situation. We've hit on McCullar, and, of course, the transfer in from Michigan is, dealing with a dislocated shoulder, and he is going to be able to go. So he's healed up and ready to rock and roll, which is good. But overall, just that front line of KU, not wonderful. What are just some treatment options? What is the medical staff likely done for McCullar here these last few months as far as treatment goes? How do you cope with this here from a medical standpoint?
First and foremost with these is, making sure you kind of complete the diagnostic pathway. So anytime somebody has, a deep bone bruise, especially a large one, you have to start asking questions as to, okay, you have this. How did you get it? What was the injury mechanism? Did you hurt something else? That's always my big thing, is if somebody's got a big bruise in their bone, you've got to make sure that other stuff, like you have a meniscus tear on board, you have a ligament injury that happened, in order to kind of impart that much force to your knee. Clearly there was stresses elsewhere on the knee. So you have to check all that stuff out, which they would have done. That's the MRI, X-ray MRI route. So you kind of get that stuff off the table. You isolate it out to the bone bruise. And then at that point, kind of initially, you've got a period of rest. Depending on the size of that kind of bone bruise and kind of how the athlete's feeling, I may do a short course of a non-weight-bearing period or limited weight-bearing period on crutches for however long it takes to kind of get them back to a reasonable level of comfort. So whether it's a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks is quite extreme, but potentially needed depending on the damage. So once you kind of get past that kind of early rest phase, now you start talking about those typical things of quad strengthening, return to play type programs, making sure they have all their biomechanics squared away. And then it becomes a matter of just kind of balancing those things that we got to keep your muscle strength up, your fitness level up, but we also got to make sure we have kind of some rest in here, so you'll cut back on some of the activities they're doing, like what they mentioned in the article, very common thing we do a lot. You start to limit practice time, you start to limit weight room time, and you're just focusing on, let's get to the season, we need you for games, we're going to slow you down here in practice, we're going to do games only. Kind of figuring out that balance, which they're doing, is important. And then you start to think about your other modalities, such as your anti-inflammatories, Aleve, Motrins, ibuprofen type medicines. And then you kind of go to that next level. Let's say you've got a big tournament coming up and everything else looks stable. Athletes like, hey, doc, I really want to try to give this a go. You could think about a steroid injection for this patient after 4 to 6 weeks would be reasonable to do that just to calm down symptoms. That would definitely be something that's kind of on the table in this scenario.
Dr. Brandon, with all this in mind, before we get you out, are you fading Kansas in the NCAA tournament, and who is your pick to win it all here in 2024?
Oh, that's a tough call. I'm a little worried about Kansas. The Stanford boys have got a couple decent shooters out there, so that could put them a little bit in jeopardy. I'd be a little worried about them going deep in the tournament. I hope they do. Gosh, if I had to pick, who's going to be the winner of the tournament, I think even though Houston lost here recently, I like the fact that Houston has some pretty mature guards out front. It seems like those teams that have had guards that have kind of been through this process before seem to go deeper in the tournament. I'd probably lean towards Houston. I think their point guard, the Shed guy, is amazing. But I would say I'd probably put those guys in there. If Creighton gets hot, Creighton can go deep in the tournament, I think. But I think Houston would probably be my call.
Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon, enjoy March. Thanks for the time today.
All right, fellas. Take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, podcast is Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity Radio, the daily show up there. Also catch it on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Follow the Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Find Elijah at Herbal Essence and Schmidt_radio for me. Get your brackets in with the Hail Varsity Radio group. Just that's on our Twitter handles. And check that out and get involved that way. Pick a winner. And find us in Gretna tomorrow at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We'll be there 4 to 6. Probably roll in a little earlier to check some Creighton hoops out. So I want to see you just off 204th Avenue on the highway as you enter into Gretna. So awesome spot. Get a pizza, get a beer, get some Bang Bang sauce, get some Boom Boom shrimp. Or did I flip them around?
No, you got it.
Did I? Okay.
And
it's great. It's awesome.
Don't forget, also a chance at free burgers for a year.
Yes, because what you got is you got a chance to draw the team you're going to ride with. 68 teams you pick, and you get that free burger for a year with Hurrdat Sports. Pretty incredible. So Fred Hoiberg has weighed in on the hire at AD with Troy Dannen.
I'm really excited about Troy. I know Troy a little bit from my time at Iowa State, actually going all the way back to high school. He used to ref some of my games. So, excited to have him on board. I know what he's all about, and that's winning. And he's got a lot of experience at this level, and we're certainly excited to have him on board. I think it's great, and, I think the biggest thing is just waiting to find the right guy. And, certainly sounds like that's the case right now. And, again, the experience that Troy has had all across the board, and knowing a lot of people at Northern Iowa that speak very highly of him, and just excited to see him. Sounds like he's going to be down here in a couple days. I texted with him a little bit today when we landed, and just excited to get going with him and hopefully can continue to build something special.
Yeah, and I hope someday somebody sits back and goes, yeah, that Elijah Herbel guy, he used to umpire me back in high school. Hated him on the baseball diamond, but he's not too bad now.
What a power-hungry egotist. I'm kidding. All refs are incredible, especially those home plate umpires with glorious mustaches. Reminder to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Tomorrow on the show, Brandon Vogel joins us. Danny Burke, Burke's Best Bets. He's maybe going to be walking in Memphis. Sorry. Jake Mielheisen, part of the Husker basketball crew, him and Kent Pavelka on site to bring you that first win for Nebraska basketball Friday night, 5:50. As it stands, looking glorious at Ameristar Casino Friday across the river. So you want to put some money down for your NCAA tournament picks. All sports of awesome things to do with Penn Gaming And we'll be at Ameristar, across the river, Council Bluffs, Friday, 4 to 6.
I'm trying to think here. I got to pull up the schedule in front of me. How many do you want to throw together a nasty Hail Varsity Radio Friday night parlay?
Yes, I do.
Because we could start it with Nebraska. I think it makes sense to start with the games following.
Is this going to be the Adam Sandler parlay in Uncut Gems, where he hits all of them and then gets whacked at the end?
Wouldn't be bad. I mean, at least you get the win. You got Nebraska A&M, then you got Vermont and Duke, Purdue against whatever 16 seed.
Elijah's going to do his best Joe Pesci in casino impersonation. Hit me again.
There's some good opportunities to make some money on Fridays. All I'm saying.
Hey, all good. See us, Gretna, Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, 4 to 6 tomorrow. Talk to you then. Lace them up. Enjoy the madness.